on this Sunday night, the eve of the historic state funeral for Queen Elizabeth II. The hundreds of dignitaries.
Canadians, mourning her loss will feel like they've lost a family member.
And the public's final chance to pay their respects. Rattled and running for their lives, the earthquake that shook Taiwan. An SOS for 911.
Well, obviously we need to change something.
The pleas to rescue Canada's struggling ambulance system. And empire of Corgis. The Queen's devotion to these adorable doggies.
Global National with Farah Nasser, reporting tonight from London.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. At Westminster Abbey behind me and all along the streets of central London, final preparations have been underway all day for one of the most grand and solemn events in recent history. But not too long ago, 2,000 guests will file into the historic building behind me where Queen Elizabeth II was married, crowned, and where her life will be celebrated tomorrow. Among the guests, the leaders of almost every country and royalty from all around the world. It's difficult to remember a time that there have been so many dignitaries in one place. Tonight, they were hosted at Buckingham Palace for what's being called the reception of the century. Our coverage begins tonight with Redmond Shannon, who has a new statement from the King. Redmond.
Farah, we are just hours away now from an event perhaps unlike anything this country has seen before. And just a short time ago, King Charles III issued a statement to people of the UK and around the world. In it, he said he wanted to say thank you to all those countless people who have been such a support and comfort to my family and myself in this time of grief.
She had that look like, are you okay? Anything I can do for you? What do you need? And then also, make sure you do what you're supposed to do.
Heads of government and foreign royals here in London, including Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelenska. Police outside Westminster Hall shutting down intersections all day as VIPs come to pay their respects. One invited leader who reportedly won't be coming to the funeral is Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman. The busy schedule continues for the new king, Charles hosting a reception for leaders and dignitaries at Buckingham Palace. And from the new Queen consort Camilla, recalling the very different era when Elizabeth became Queen.
It must have been so difficult for her being a solitary woman. There weren't women prime ministers or women presidents. She was the only one, so I think she carved her own role.
For members of the public who still wish to see the Queen lying in state, time is running out. The queue is being closed on Sunday. Those at the end of it right now expected to reach Westminster Hall in the early hours of Monday morning.
Wristband, please. There you go. Thank you. Right round there, yeah? Okay.
A last-minute rush to be part of history before it's too late.
I came all this far, I will make it. I have faith, I'll make it. If I don't make it, I wouldn't forgive myself.
Driven very sensibly down the M1 and ran very fast. So now we're going to hot foot it. We're ready for the elements, we've got a little backpack, ready to go.
That line has now closed. The doors of Westminster Hall will shut at 6:30 a.m. local time, and just over 4 hours after that, the procession begins to Westminster Abbey for the funeral. Farah?
Redmond Shannon here in London tonight. Thank you, Redmond. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau sat down with his UK counterpart and a handful of other leaders today. Our Abigail Bimman's traveling with the Canadian delegation and joins us now. Abigail.
Farah, this trip is focused on the Queen, but it's also remarkable to have so many world leaders in one place. So the Prime Minister began his day meeting with the Australian Prime Minister before heading to 10 Downing Street.
The famous 10 Downing Street cat Larry getting more exposure to world leaders this weekend as so many gather in London ahead of the Queen's funeral.
It started obviously with sympathies and condolences for all of our loss.
Justin Trudeau had his first meeting with new UK Prime Minister Liz Truss.
We talked a fair bit about trade, about the Canada-UK trade agreement that is continuing in its negotiations to find a permanent bilateral trade deal that is advancing well.
But Trudeau says Ukraine topped the agenda. He met with Ukraine's Prime Minister Sunday too, though he wouldn't say whether Canada will offer more concrete aid. The Prime Minister also attended multiple events not on his public itinerary and closed to media. Stephen Harper was invested into the Order of Canada in front of all the other former Prime Ministers and Governors General on the trip. Later, King Charles hosted a reception for world leaders on the eve of his mother's funeral.
Great example of the sense of duty and doing the job that you have to do for the public with great dignity. It's why she's respected in every part of the world. It's a big loss for everybody.
To represent the Order of Canada, a huge honor.
Olympian Mark Tewksbury is part of the Canadian delegation and the funeral procession.
The Queen has brought so many of us together, and it just reminds you of her reach and her power and her beautiful service.
It's a goodbye on a grand scale, uniting everyone from average Canadians who traveled here to line the route to the official delegation to heads of state and people from right around the globe. Farah?
Abigail Bimman here in London tonight. Thank you, Abigail. And we caught up with a Canadian who just found out he will be inside Westminster Abbey tomorrow. Lieutenant Colonel Mark Flint of the North Shore New Brunswick Regiment says it will be an honor of a lifetime to attend the funeral of his Commander-in-Chief.
I was a very late addition to the process, and you know, I'm so thankful that it was me. And I think on a personal note, I actually grew up in England, and I emigrated to Canada in 1975. So for me, and certainly my mother, she is thinking very deeply about this moment and that I'm here. So I FaceTimed her last night, and she was very emotional and teary. And you know, she grew up here for all of her life, and she's 78 now. And so, like so many Britons have said on their interviews over the last few days, she's the only queen that she's ever known. And so to have her son here, yeah, it's an immense point of pride for her.
And just a reminder, the Queen's state funeral is in several hours. Our Donna Friesen is going to anchor our live coverage tomorrow starting at 5 a.m. Eastern, 2 a.m. Pacific, here on Global Television, globalnews.ca, and on all our other streaming platforms. After Hurricane Maria flattened it 5 years ago, Puerto Rico's power grid has been left in a fragile state. Coming up, the new storm spawning new problems. Plus, when every second matters, Canadian ambulance response times hit a crisis point. Security cameras caught this terrifying moment in Taiwan. The ceiling of this gym collapsed, forcing badminton players to run for cover as a powerful 6.8 earthquake, along with aftershocks, rocked the country's east. The quake toppled a 3-story building, collapsing roads, trapping hundreds of tourists on a mountainside, and causing a passenger train to derail. And breaking news out of Puerto Rico, where Hurricane Fiona is battering the Caribbean island, already knocking out power to the entire U.S. territory. The storm is packing fierce winds, clocking 130 kilometers an hour and triggering flash floods. It's feared Fiona will also bring record rain and mudslides. Fiona's already devastated the French territory of Guadeloupe, killing at least one person. In an emergency, every second matters. And when you call 911, you'd hope an ambulance arrives in minutes. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, with the pressures in Canada's healthcare system stretching beyond hospitals. As Heather Yourex-West explains, advocates say the remedy for that is a revamp.
September 10th, Calgary. A youth hockey tryout, and a player takes a difficult hit.
As a dad watching, you're hoping that he can get up. He didn't get up right away. He wasn't moving.
August 6th, New Westminster, BC. An 81-year-old former city councillor suffers a stroke. 911 is called right away.
Luckily, there were some friends with her, and one was a doctor.
But when Seva Brar and Lori Williams needed the help of an ambulance, it wasn't there. Seva, just 14, waited on the ice for more than an hour before the fire department responded instead. And while an ambulance eventually came for Williams, it was 2 hours before she reached a hospital just a few blocks away. She's been left partially paralyzed by her stroke.
Well, obviously we need to change something.
right? Like this is not just in Calgary, this is Canada-wide.
Paramedics across the country agree. Ambulances are struggling to get to calls as fast as they should in every province and territory.
Bystanders are waiting an extraordinary long time for paramedics to get to scene because we're tied up in hospitals. We're seeing this with people who have fallen, hip fractures. We're seeing the elderly suffer.
It's a symptom of a health system in crisis across the board. After more than 2 years of COVID, health workers are burnt out. Staffing levels are falling just as demand for care is on the rise.
The numbers are coming up in all areas. I think people in mental health crisis, certainly some of the addiction crisis are standing out, but it's in general, it's all types of calls are coming up.
Advocates say Canada's health system is in need of an emergency overhaul, a restructuring to meet the needs of an aging population, dealing with an escalating crisis of addictions and mental health.
Remember, the system was built in the 60s. The 60s and today's as two different kind of worlds. It is important that we consider an increase in funding, but funding is not just the only solution.
But solutions are needed now, with a potentially tough flu season poised to add more pressure to a system unable to cope. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
The master's ceremony was supposed to go to the mic.
Ahead, when former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien was left singing and sweating before Her Majesty. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's own connection to the Queen is a little closer than most. Trudeau has known her personally since he was a child, when his father, Pierre, led Canada. Earlier, I spoke with the PM and his wife, Sophie, on how they're remembering the late monarch and what's next for their relationship with the new king. Mr. Prime Minister, you have known the Queen since you were 5 years old. You've said she was one of your favorite people. Are there any defining stories or moments that really stand out to you?
Her steady presence throughout my life and her very active presence these past 7 years was just a constant. There was no surprises with her. I knew anytime I came to meet her, she would be incredibly gracious and thoughtful and curious and engaged.
I remember that she was so present, the integrity of her presence, that deep reassurance of being there, of being present, and of deep listening. Her late Majesty's reign was so incredibly powerful from a female leadership point of view, and I celebrate that.
We all know her from, waving on the balcony at Buckingham Palace, but you two both got to meet her behind closed doors. A lot of people talk about her wit and her sense of humor. Can you tell me a bit about that?
First of all, she was extraordinarily gracious in that whenever she met anyone, she was focused on what that moment needed to be, and it always needed to be her there and present. And her ability to do that, to hit the right mark, to hit the right tone, to connect with people the right way, means that, yes, we knew her from having directed, interacted with her, but the people lining the streets outside, Canadians, mourning her loss, who feel like they've lost a family member, are not wrong, because they knew her too. Because if you watched her publicly, if you heard her speak, you knew her because she was genuinely the person that she'd share publicly.
You've also known the king for a long time, and you met with him yesterday. What were your impressions of him now that he's in this role?
He is going to be steady and engaged and thoughtful like his mother was. He knows Canada very well. He's spent such time there. He's been active on protecting the planet, on engaging with people around the world. He's very interested in Indigenous reconciliation. There's a lot of good work to do that he is going to be able to lead within the limits and the position he has. But I think his commitment to listening, engaging, learning, embodying a thoughtful generational path forward.
Speaking about the Indigenous issue, many Indigenous people in Canada have a less favorable view of the Crown. Do you think the monarchy is an impediment to reconciliation?
No, I think it's a powerful tool for reconciliation. It's got to be a part of the path forward. Appointing the first Indigenous Governor General, for example, was a key step forward in reconciliation. Having a king who is making deliberate efforts to learn, to understand, to embody a new relationship with Indigenous peoples that we're developing as a country is essential.
We have new polling that shows that the majority of Canadians think it's time to move on from the monarchy. Given that, and given that times have changed, is it not the time to begin at least a national conversation on that?
I think Canadians vastly and majoritarily appreciate the stability of our democracy. We are able to have all the strength of debates that we need to have in Canada without worrying about the overarching stability of our institutions, because they are embodied by structures that have been in place for hundreds of years. Canadians have been through a lot of constitutional wranglings over the past decades. I think the appetite for what it would take when there are so many big things to focus on is simply a non-starter.
How are you feeling today? How are you, this moment? I mean, it must be so big for you.
And I think it's a moment as well where we know how fast everything moves and how complicated, how troubled the world is right now. Taking a moment to position ourselves in the sweep of history, this is a moment to take stock, to reflect on where we're going, on what we're focusing on, and how we continue to be there for each other in a world that is changing but still has symbols of steadiness that we can anchor ourselves to.
Mr. Prime Minister, Madame Gregoire Trudeau, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien also shared a special bond with Her Majesty. I had a chance to speak with him as well today, and he shared with us a story about the time he was forced to sing in front of her and in front of a crowd of thousands of people at an event.
The master of ceremony was supposed to go to the mic and sing "O Canada," but the guy was too nervous. So he turned to me, he said, "I cannot do that." So the call of duty, I got up and moved to the mic. But I started to sing "O Canada" in French, and nobody came along. I was sweating. My wife said she'd never been so shy in her life. And when I met the Queen after that, I said, she was laughing. And I said, "Your Majesty, very few Canadians have been soloists for the royal family. But don't ask me to sing at this moment. You will know why she was laughing."
Corgis of the Crown. Next, the history behind the Queen's famous little friends. It's no secret just how much the Queen loved corgis. Over her 70-year reign, she's believed to have owned dozens of the adorable dogs and still had a few under her care before she died. Jeff Semple looks at the long history of her furry royal companions.
Pembrokeshire in western Wales is known for its stunning coastline and countryside, but the county is perhaps most famous for its four-legged residents. The Pembroke Welsh Corgi. These cute, curious, cattle-herding dogs originated here in Pembrokeshire.
They're so lovely, you know. Come on.
This couple has been breeding corgis for a decade, including plenty of prize pooches.
How many do you have here now? One or two. Too many.
Too many.
Too many.
They recently sold one named Vicky to a Canadian near Toronto, now on her way to becoming a champion. And some of Vicky's cousins live in London.
This particular breed, called Welsh Corgi Pembrokes, are a little bit smaller than other breeds. And as you might have recognized, they've also enjoyed a lifelong friendship with royalty.
Almost everywhere the Queen went, her contingent of corgis wasn't far behind. Her first, named Susan, was a present for her 18th birthday. Over 6 decades, she owned more than 30 of Susan's descendants, a royal doggy dynasty.
She just had too many dogs.
The Queen's animal psychologist says she had remarkable control over her corgis. But when she left, things could get rough. The dogs were known for nipping at people's ankles and getting into terrible tussles.
I did say, Mum, possibly you've got too many dogs, you know. And she said, Dr. Mugford, Philip, has been telling me that for years. And if I wanted to hear that, I wouldn't have paid you to come and help me out.
Eventually, she heeded that advice. At the end, the Queen owned just a couple of Corgis. They're now living with Prince Andrew. Asked how the dogs are doing, William said they're just fine. These Pembrokeshire pups, once considered an endangered breed, are now thriving, thanks in no small part to their famous best friend. But it's hard to imagine this place without them. Jeff Semple, Global News, London.